The villain in a zombie game is often the zombies, but there's no central antagonist. The true villain is the environment and its inhabitants. Sure, sometimes there's a person directly responsible for the outbreak, but oftentimes they just want to sow chaos, not directly infect. But what if the infection could think? What if the infection could feel? What if the infection hated? What if the infection wanted to corrupt every living thing in the galaxy? What if the infection was from the same publisher as Yoshi's Woolly World? This is today's subject, Metroid Prime, or as she's better known, Dark Samus. Metroid villains usually have some grand goal that involves galactic conquest. They often plan to do this through extreme displays of force and overwhelming armies. But Dark Samus takes a more disturbing approach. Now, Metroid has always been the closest thing Nintendo has had to a horror franchise, with X-Parasites being an invasive form of possession. But there's something cancerous about Phazon sickness. The electric blue tingle, the way it grafts itself onto your DNA, how it distorts your vision, and how you can feel the rage flowing through you. There's something more disturbing about it than simple possession. Because the Prime Trilogy makes sure to infect Samus with Phazon, it directly demonstrates to the player the effect that Phazon will have on the galaxy, making the player invested in stopping it because of the unpleasant stimuli Prime 3 gives the player when entering hyper mode. So what creature would seek to control such a toxicity? Let's take a look at a rare aspect for Nintendo villains, hell, Nintendo characters to have: a character arc. In my opinion, the biggest claim Metroids had to being the title of the franchise was how fantastic their name was. The Metroids are never presented as an actual tough-to-beat threat. They have an exploitable weakness, no ranged attacks, and it seems plausible that the Federation could handle them after some R&D into ice weapons. But like the arguments for artificial intelligence in the real world, the true threats Metroids represent is their capability to evolve. The fact that the Metroid Prime evolved from a regular Metroid that absorbed Phazon is what makes it so terrifying. It's pure chance that an army of Metroid Primes didn't evolve, but the Metroid Prime could evolve further into Dark Samus. When Dark Samus is born into the galaxy, she develops emotion, more specifically hate for Samus. This is why her actions are so odd. She heads to Aether to absorb more Phazon, but her actions in Metroid Prime 2 seemingly revolve around killing Samus. She only shows up to actively hinder our progress. Shouldn't she just be focused on absorbing more Phazon than leaving? Setting aside the 1,000,000,000 odds that she chose to go to the planet that Samus just so happens to get sent to, her actions are totally random throughout Metroid Prime 2, even reverting to a beastly form just to try and kill Samus once and for all. Which brings us to her character in Metroid Prime 3. Now, once again, there are some major logic holes in this character arc. How did regenerating in space change her personality? In Echoes, she acted like a wild beast that slaughtered anyone that stood in her way, pirate or Ing. But in Corruption, she's become a mastermind, enslaving the space pirates and formulating a plan to infect the universe with Phazon. While this 180 personality goes totally unexplained, this is the version of Dark Samus I prefer. Samus is a lone hunter who sets out to worlds unknown and fights her way through planets as she goes along. It makes sense that her dark alter ego would be cunning and have entire planets at her fingertips. While it does bother me that Dark Samus seems to no longer care about Samus in Corruption, she just wants to infect the galaxy and Samus wants to stop her. They lost that back and forth dance they had in Echoes. The mystery of who this dark doppelganger was, what were her motivations, and why did she look like Samus? This culminates when Dark Samus reverts to her primal form, no pun intended, and those same soulless voids stare back into Samus's visor, revealing to her that the Metroid Prime isn't dead. The Corruption version of Dark Samus isn't as personal a villain anymore, but the Dark Overlord Samus is the far more sinister villain. She realized that her goals must evolve from one bounty hunter, and she needs to turn the galaxy to her side, where weak life forms are eradicated, and the strong serve her. You couldn't have such a fantastic character without her spectacular boss fights. It helps that a lot of the boss fights in Echoes are terrible, and Dark Samus is a more straightforward strafe and shoot fight. I will say, however, that while her final boss fight is amazingly stressful with the timer ticking down, introducing the new mechanic of absorbing her attacks with a charge beam in the final boss fight is some pretty poor game design, but the showdown in Corruption was absolutely epic. No gimmicky items to use, no swapping between vices, just firepower against firepower, a straight up shoot up and showdown. She uses the powers of the hunters she's corrupted, and when you combine 3 awesome bosses into one, you've got a winning formula. I usually end my essays with a conclusion, but today I'd like to offer a question. Have we truly seen the last of Dark Samus? Can you do Metroid Prime 4 without the title character? Is it possible that when Phase erupted, a part of Dark Samus lived on within it? It wouldn't be the first time she's come back with no explanation. Whether Dark Samus is truly alive or gone for good, I can only say that Metroid Prime 4 has one hell of a void to fill.